My name's Kip. This is me. I had a cliche US American childhood. My mom was a teacher, my dad was in the military, and I have one sister. I played all the sports growing up, but I always loved the outdoors and camping. Life was simple, not a care in the world. And then this guy showed up. Like so many of us, I saw his film An Inconvenient Truth about the impacts of global warming, and it scared the emojis out of me. In Al Gore's film, he describes how our Earth is in peril. Climate change stands to affect all life on this planet. From monster storms, raging wildfires, record droughts, ice caps melting, acidification of the oceans, to entire countries going underwater. That could all be caused by humans' demands on the Earth. I wanted to do everything I could to help. I made up my mind right then and there to change how I lived and to do whatever I possibly could to find a way for all of us to live together, in balance with the planet sustainably forever. I started to do all the things Al told us to do. I became an OCE, Obsessive Compulsive Environmentalist. I separated the trash and recycling, I composted, changed all the light bulbs, took short showers, turned the water off when I brushed my teeth, turned off lights when leaving a room, and rode my bike instead of driving everywhere. But as the years went by, it seemed as if things were getting worse. I had to wonder, with all the continuing ecological crisis facing the planet, even if every single one of us adopted these conservation habits, was this really going to be enough to save the world? It just seemed that there was something more to the story. I thought I was doing everything I could to help the planet. But then, with one friend's post, everything changed. The post sent me to a report online published by the United Nations stating that raising livestock produces more greenhouse gases than the emissions of the entire transportation sector. This means that the meat and dairy industry produces more greenhouse gases than the exhaust of all cars, trucks, trains, boats, planes combined. Cows and other farmed animals produce a substantial amount of methane from their digestive process. Methane gas from livestock is 86 times more destructive than carbon dioxide from vehicles. It turns out there's more to climate change than just fossil fuels. I started doing more research. The UN, along with other agencies, reported that not only did livestock play a major role in global warming, it is also the leading cause of resource consumption and environmental degradation destroying the planet today. How is it possible I wasn't aware of this? I thought this information would be plastered everywhere in the environmental community. It seemed the main focus for many of these groups was natural gas and oil production, with fracking being the latest hot issue due to water usage and contamination. Hydraulic fracturing for natural gas uses an incredible amount of water. A staggering 100 billion gallons of water is used every year in the United States. But when I compared this with animal agriculture, raising livestock just in the US consumes 34 trillion gallons of water. And it turns out the methane emissions from both industries are nearly equal. Living in California, a state plagued by drought and water shortages, water use is a major concern for many of us.
The average Californian uses about 1,500 gallons per person per day. About half of that is related to the consumption of meat and dairy products. So meat and dairy products are incredibly water intensive, in part because the animals are using very water intensive grains. That's what they eat. And so all of the water embedded in the grain and that the animal eats essentially is considered part of the virtual water footprint of that product.
I found out that 1/4 pound hamburger requires over 660 gallons of water to produce. Here I've been taking these short showers trying to save water, and to find out just eating one hamburger is the equivalent of showering 2 entire months. So much attention is given to lowering our home water use, yet domestic water use is only 5% of what is consumed in the US versus 55% for animal agriculture. That's because it takes upwards of 2,500 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef. I started doing more investigating on the impacts of livestock and found out this situation was actually worse than I had thought. The transportation and energy sectors are understandably given a lot of attention because of the terrible impact carbon dioxide is having on our climate. But animal agriculture produces 65% of the world's nitrous oxide, a gas with a global warming potential 296 times greater than CO2 per pound. Yet all we hear about is fossil fuels. Energy-related CO2 emissions are expected to increase 20% by the year 2040. Yet emissions from agriculture are predicted to increase 80% by 2050. This devastating figure is mostly due to a projected global increase in meat and dairy consumption. According to two environmental specialists at the World Bank Group, using the global standard for measuring greenhouse gases, concluded that animal agriculture was responsible for 51% of human-caused climate change when the loss of carbon sinks, respiration, and methane are properly accounted for, which the UN study failed to address. But not only that, I found out that raising animals for food is responsible for 30% of the world's water consumption, occupies up to 45% of the Earth's land, is responsible for up to 91% of Brazilian Amazon destruction, is a leading cause of ocean dead zones, habitat destruction, and species extinction.
It's an environmental disaster that's being ignored by the very people who should be championing. Deforestation, land use, water scarcity, the destabilization of communities, world hunger. The list doesn't stop.
Free-living animals made up, 10,000 years ago, made up 99% of the biomass. And human beings, we only made up 1% of the biomass. Today, only 10,000 years later, which is really just a fraction of time, we human beings and the animals that we own as property make up 98% of the biomass. And wild, free-living animals make up only 2%. We've basically completely stolen the world, the earth, from free-living animals to use for ourselves and our cows and pigs and chickens and factory farmed fish. And the oceans have been even more devastated.
Concerned researchers of the loss of species agree that the primary cause of loss of species on our Earth that we're witnessing is due to overgrazing and habitat loss from livestock production on land and by overfishing, which I call fishing, in our oceans.
And we're in the middle of the largest mass extinction of species in 65 million years. The rainforest is being cut down at the rate of an acre per second. And the driving force behind all of this is animal agriculture, cutting down the forest to graze animals and to grow soybeans, genetically engineered soybeans to feed to the cows and pigs and chickens and factory farmed fish.
91% of the loss of rainforest in the Amazon area thus far to date, 91% that's been destroyed is due to raising livestock.
The leading cause of environmental destruction is animal agriculture.
Methane production from cows and other livestock's flatulence is a major contributor, but mostly it is due to deforestation and the waste they produce, which is 130 times more waste than the entire human population, virtually all without the benefit of any waste treatment. 116,000 pounds of farm animal excrement is produced every second in the United States alone. That is enough waste per year to cover every square foot of San Francisco, New York City, Tokyo, Paris, New Delhi, Berlin, Hong Kong, London, Rio de Janeiro, Delaware, Bali, Costa Rica, and Denmark combined.
Livestock operations on land has caused created more than 500 nitrogen-flooded dead zones around the world in our oceans, comprise more than 95,000 square miles of areas completely devoid of life. So any meaningful discussion about the state of our oceans has to always begin by frank discussions about land-based animal agriculture.
The UN reported that 3/4 of the world's fisheries are overexploited, fully exploited, or significantly depleted due to overfishing.
The fact that when people look at fishing, sometimes they're only looking at the fact of the animals who are actually consumed by humans, and we're not necessarily looking at all the animals who are caught in the drift nets, all the other animals who are killed in the industry.
We're at over 28 billion animals were pulled out of the ocean last year. They're not ever given a chance to recover. They can't recover. They don't multiply that quickly. They don't come back. We're not giving them an opportunity.
The way fishing is done today to feed the demand for 90 million tons of fish is primarily through massive fish nets. For every single pound of fish caught, there's up to 5 pounds of untargeted species trapped, such as dolphins, whales, sea turtles, and sharks, known as bykill. If we were to imagine this same sort of practice happening on the African savanna, targeting gazelle, but in the process scooping up every single lion, giraffe, ostrich, and elephant, nobody would stand for it. Yet, this is what is happening in our oceans every single day. Perhaps the only other ecosystem that is being destroyed at such a rapid rate are the world's rainforests. Our global rainforests are essentially the planet's lungs. They breathe in CO2 and exhale oxygen. An acre of rainforest is cleared every second, and the leading cause is to graze animals and grow their feed crops. That is essentially an entire football field cleared every single second. And it is estimated that every day, close to 100 plant, animal, and insect species are lost due to rainforest destruction. Palm oil plantations are causing tremendous deforestation in the Indonesian rainforest. It is estimated that palm oil is responsible for 26 million acres being cleared. Though, compared to livestock and their feed crops, they were responsible for 136 million acres of rainforest lost to date.
Typically, a cow will eat 140 to 150 pounds of feed a day. 40 to 50 pounds of feed every day. And then she's also going to drink between 30 and 40 gallons of water. Probably go through about 20 tons per week. 20 tons of grain per week. Primarily for our milking cows, so about 250 cows. There's very few places on this planet that have this type of environment. But the demand on dairy-based protein in the world is only going to increase. And there's not enough land on the planet to do this type of dairying around the world. It's just the environment is not going to be that way. The land's not there.
So I guess on a global scale, a conclusion would be dairy is not sustainable.
Unless we start digging up houses and putting pastures back. And the only way to start digging up houses and development is to have less people. We only know that population is going to continue to grow. So that means more commercial dairying, I'm sure.
Either that or some lower demand by the people.
Yeah, or some other product's going to take its place.
He was right. How could cow's milk be sustainable? For when 1 gallon of milk, it takes upwards of 1,000 gallons of water to produce. Almost a third of the planet's land is becoming desert, with a vast majority due to livestock grazing. Some people would say the problem isn't really animal agriculture, but actually human overpopulation. In 1812, there were 1 billion people on the planet. In 1912, there were 1.5 billion. Then, just 100 years later, our population exploded to 7 billion humans. This number is rightly given a great deal of attention, but an even more important figure when determining world population is the world's 70 billion farm animals humans raise. The human population drinks 5.2 billion gallons of water every day and eats 21 billion pounds of food. But just the world's 1.5 billion cows alone drink 45 billion gallons of water every day and eat 135 billion pounds of food. This isn't so much a human population issue, it's a human eating animals population issue.
We have roughly 1 billion people starving every single day. Worldwide, 50% of the grain and legumes that we're growing, we're feeding to animals. So they're eating huge amounts of grain and legumes. And in the United States, it's more like closer to 70, 80, depending on which grain it is, about 90% of the soybeans.
82% of the world's starving children live in countries where food is fed to animals in the livestock systems that are then killed and eaten by more well-off individuals in developed countries such as the US, UK, and in Europe.
The fact of it is that we could feed every human being on the planet today an adequate diet if we did no more than take the feed that we are feeding to animals and actually turn it into food for humans.
Only 2 ounces a week seem like nothing. People could probably raise that in their own backyard. Maybe backyard farming was a sustainable solution.
I have 42 ducks. I started off with 3 ducks 3 years ago, and then those burdened into a population. I buy a 75-pound bag of seed. And that seed bag will last me right now about 2 weeks. The ducks now that we're going to be culling are about 2 years old. When you're living with them, they get used to you. They're not intimidated or whatever, and so they make all their vocal sounds like natural. Go down. Easy, 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 easy. Okay. Now we're going to keep you. Run. the fingers.
I just can't do it. I don't think I could have someone else do it for me if I can't do it. If I can't do it, I don't want someone else doing it for me. I had already scheduled weeks in advance to film another backyard slaughter of a chicken that stopped producing eggs. I didn't know how I was going to possibly go through another slaughter. So I didn't.
Animal Place is a farm animal sanctuary in Northern California that focuses on rescuing animals from the animal agriculture industry. A lot of people don't realize that meat breed chickens, like this guy behind us, they're generally slaughtered at about 42 days old, whereas chickens that are bred for egg production are killed when their productivity starts to decrease, when they start laying less eggs. And that generally happens about 18 months to 20 months.
It doesn't matter if you buy caged eggs, eggs from hens on cage-free farms or free-range farms or pasture-based farms. Hi, Carol. It doesn't matter.
But what if people just ate less animal products, like going meatless on Mondays?
When you go meatless on Monday, if you ascribe to that campaign, you're essentially contributing to climate change, pollution, depletion of our planet's resources, and your own health, then on only 6 days of the week instead of 7. You're creating a false justification, clearly a false sense of justification for what you're doing on those other 6 days of the week. So in other words, we really shouldn't be resting on our laurels of what you do right only 1/7 of the time.
You can't be an environmentalist and eat animal products, period.
To feed a person on an all-plant-based vegan diet for a year requires just 1/6 of an acre of land. To feed that same person on a vegetarian diet that includes eggs and dairy requires 3 times as much land. To feed an average U.S. citizen's high-consumption diet of meat, dairy, and eggs requires 18 times as much land. This is because you can produce 37,000 pounds of vegetables on 1.5 acres, but only 375 pounds of meat on that same plot of land.
If we all, as a society, did go vegan, and we moved away from eating animal foods and toward a plant-based diet, well, what would happen? If we didn't kill all these cows and eat them, then we wouldn't have to breed all these cows, because we're breeding cows and chickens and pigs and fishes. We're breeding them over and over again, relentlessly. So if we didn't breed them, then we wouldn't have to feed them. If we didn't have to feed them, then we wouldn't have to devote all this land to growing grains and legumes and so forth to feed to them. And so then the forest could come back. Wildlife could come back. The oceans would come back. The rivers would run clean again. The air would come back. Health would return.
Renewable energy infrastructure, such as building solar and wind generators all over our country to reduce climate change, I mean, that's a pretty good idea, but it's projected to take at least 20 years and at least minimally $18 trillion to develop. Another solution to climate change, we could stop eating animals. And it could be done today. It doesn't have to take 20 years, and it certainly doesn't have to take $18 trillion because it costs nothing.
I had to come to the full conclusion the only way to sustainably and ethically live on this planet with 7 billion other people is to live an entirely plant-based vegan diet. I decided instead of eating others to eat for others. At first, like these environmental groups, I was afraid of what it'd mean to change, but now I embrace it. All this talk about sustainability sounded like our planet was on some sort of life support, and I don't want her to simply survive or to sustain, but to thrive. Life today is not about sustainability, it's about thrivability. She's given so much to us for so long, it was time to give back. 108% of everything we have. It felt good. It was in alignment.
And we see this movement not just about providing cheaper and inexpensive food that everyone can have, but also a spiritual move. A move towards understanding who we really are and how we can really connect to each other.
Do what you can do as well as you can do it every day of your life, and you will end up dying one of the happiest individuals that ever died.
We become part of a gathering momentum of other people. It's happening. This is really what's happening. This is the news.
Selflessness is a nice way to be. It has all these benefits for yourself as well as the planet and other people. So it's a beautiful way to live. Ecologically, it just feels better.
This is about massively transforming how our society eats because it's a necessity.
It's acting on what we know and acting kindly and gently on the whole planet and with other people to accomplish the goals of living better. We can do it, but we have to choose to do it. You can change the world. You must change the world.